Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our uh, monthly contributors and our one time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, a neighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. A Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm your host, David Gornoski, here with Surit, Dasgupta, and Jordan Landfear. We're going to have a podcast discussion about Surit's latest article, which is up on a neighborschoice.com. Surit, tell us the title of this story.
Well, the name of the article is Man as Medium for Christ's Sacrifice. And it's basically like using the gospel to deconstruct how men and women interact in our time. And I kind of like sprinkled in a little bit of Philip K. Dick in there.
You sprinkled
So
what?
Philip K. Dick is the author of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's the influence for Blade Runner. So a lot of people might have seen the movie and are not familiar with the novel, but the novel has a very interesting take on male and female relations within the framework of science fiction dystopian setting. So I found it fascinating that the main character of that novel, who is a bounty hunter, hunts down rogue androids, right? So in the movie, they're known as replicants, but here in the novel, they're just known as androids.
Mhm.
And these androids are pretty much very lifelike, right? You can't even tell the difference like between a human and an android because they're so lifelike. You have to do a certain test on them to you know dis- discern whether they are human or not. So that's how real they appear. So the main character Deckard has little problem destroying these androids, the male versions, but he has a lot of problems. He is often conflicted when he comes across a female android, and he later comes to find out that it's because of his empathy scale. It's way up there, right? So I wanted to dive deep into that. What, like, this is true not only for the protagonist of that novel, but of human beings in general. Like uh like the Titanic thing, the women and children first rule. Why do we have a special empathy towards women and children? Why do men look at them as vulnerable? And I mean, they are physically vulnerable, but societally, it is like it's a general rule. Like, you open the door for a lady, you when a disaster strikes, it's often the women and children who are given first priority to get them to safety. Why do we have such an this kind of worldview? And yeah, that's like the presupposition, I guess, when I'm diving into that uh brief study, if you will.
So the Android thing is interesting because we've been talking on this show on different discussions about the increase in people not believing things are real anymore. Like people keep sending videos saying that Biden has a mask on, and I keep saying, well, hell, he could do a lot better for a mask if that's what his mask looks like. You know what I mean? What's the point that they keep saying that his skin folds look like he's got a mask on? And
Yeah,
there's all
AI.
these videos about like people down in Peru, they keep being tormented by 10-foot green guys, and some people say it's just a local cartel terrorizing them in the middle of the night with masks, and other people say it's like a real thing, and it's being reported in like mainstream media newspapers. And of course, you have the alien thing going on, which we talked about. But there's this weird return of like mainstream normalization of people not believing what is real. Like they don't know what is real anymore. And it's like there's always an illusion. You know, AI is AI talking to you when they now the AI is supposed to call you and say, hey, it's your mom. I have a flat tire. I need help. Send money to a gift card. You know, send money to a gift card to send money on gift card. And you're like, wait a second, it's got using a synthetic replication of someone you know, right? And so you know, it's like that's AI now is going to be doing these types of scams. They have deep fakes. You have people like Jim Carrey circling repeatedly a news interviewer at an entertainment red carpet event, just circling her repeatedly, saying that Jim Carrey is not a real person; it's a character he played. So a lot of people are
Oh, wow.
questioning what is reality. You have Cat Williams saying that Chris Tucker was, uh, you know, going to Jeffrey Epstein Island. You got Cat Williams saying Harvey Weinstein told him that he wanted to perform fellatio on him to get a job at a Hollywood movie that Harvey Weinstein was producing. And then he walked into the room and he saw there was 3 other black guys, and he said, "Y'all got to do that too." That's what Cat Williams said. So,
Yeah.
uh, you know, a lot of weird things happening in terms of what's real and what's not. You know, are movies movies, or are they, you know, vessels for propaganda? Are androids? You know, now people are worried about AI, but this this story, how old is it? It was written in what
It
year?
was written in 1960s,
It was
I
kind of
think.
prescient, wasn't it? About this
Hmm.
blurring of what's real and what's not, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. That story is very fascinating for the things that I mentioned, and also like even the movie Blade Runner that was inspired by it. I mean, there were drastic changes made in the plot of the movie from the novel, but even then, like it's still so interesting because if you read Philip K. Dick's his book, uh the androids are not at all, merciful or compassionate. They're very ruthless, they're cold, calculating, they're deceiving, they play with you and all of that. But in Ridley Scott's movie, they're very humanized, right? Like even to the point where we see that Harrison Ford's character, it might be one of the replicants or androids or whatever. So it's fascinating, like as the years progressed, how much humanization is being put on the artificial intelligence thing, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's all part of the undifferentiation process.
I I wanted to go to what you said in your article about this. You said some early Christian thinkers have suggested that Adam's sin is a kind of imperfect precursor of Christ's sacrifice. St. Augustine was one of them. He says in his commentary on Genesis, Adam sinned on account of his love for Eve. I've never
Mm,
heard of that before. That's interesting. You know, usually
that's
the common criticism is more on the man. You know, in conservative theological circles, if there's a takeaway about gender dynamics, if they make a takeaway about gender relationships in the fall, it's usually the point that Eve was meant to be Adam's helper, and because Adam did not stand up for Eve and did not stand up against the snake, he should have been there watching for that serpent character. And because he wasn't there doing his due diligence to say, hey, stay away, get away, don't listen to him, because he was not leading, then she fell. And then when he blames her, it's again a sign that his failure is a lack of leadership and self-sacrificial courage to protect the woman who is emotionally manipulated by this trickster figure. But in this telling of it, I've never heard of this before. So this was something new that I think people are going to like at your article at a neighborschoice.com, that St. Augustine, you're saying, in City of God suggests that he did so out of a love for his wife. He, in talking in chapter 14 of City of God, this falling away is spontaneous, for if the will had remained steadfast in the love of that higher and changeless good by which it was illumined to intelligence and kindled into love, it would not have turned away to find satisfaction in itself, and so become frigid and benighted. The woman would not have believed the serpent spoke the truth, nor would the man have preferred the request of his wife to the command of God, nor have supposed that it was a venial transgression to cleave to the partner of his life, even in a partnership of sin. I guess that doesn't have to be mutually exclusive takeaway points, does it, really?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can still, I mean, that Augustine's interpretation does not necessarily exclude Adam from any guilt or any error, but I guess he is sort of expanding on what Paul wrote in First Timothy. It's like the man was not deceived, but it was the woman that was who was deceived. So what does that mean? I mean, it means like Satan did not pursue Adam in the same way he pursued Eve, right? He did not trick Adam in the same way he tricked Eve. So I guess Adam's what Augustine is saying there is that Adam sinned because he took a voluntary decision to sin with Eve, so that he would Eve would not be separated from him, and he did not want to be separated from Eve, right? So it kind of
So he was a
gels well.
he was a simp, as the Gen Z people say.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in today's world, like where we parody and mock all of these things, like the sinful fallenness of human nature, uh, he would be known as a simp. And I mean, even like a lot
So
of the
Adam
red pill.
fell because he was a simp. So all of mankind, tigers rip apart their prey, and wild jackals in Africa tear apart the intestines of antelopes while they're still living, because Adam was a simp. That's what you're saying. That's the point of your article here.
Well, I mean, we have to look at where this whole thing, like I was saying, this women and children first. We are at a stage where conventional masculinity requires, and it's compulsory if you want to be known as a true man, that you do not hit a woman, that you help a woman regardless. If a woman hits you, you do not hit back, right? That's the general rule. So where does this come from? This comes from all of this things that are laid out in Genesis. It's also expanded drastically by Jesus as he is sacrificed on the cross. So that's how the entire, like, prior to and I think you can see some of this in Girard's work as well. Prior to Christ's coming, women were basically treated as chattel, right? So when an invading army conquered your whole territory, what are the chances of the woman in your territory still staying beside you? No, they had the survival instincts kicked in. They had to, choose to be on the side of the invaders. Otherwise, they would be wiped out as well. So this was like how intergender dynamics were prior to the coming of Christ, and after Christ, his interactions with Mary Magdalene, his his interactions with Mary and Martha, and all of these women of the New Testament, it drastically changed intergender
Is that
dynamics.
is that where they got that Indian ritual where they would, have the woman thrown on the fire with the husband because it was like a dishonor, the idea of her remarrying?
Yeah, it was the that's called the sati ritual, where
Sati?
yeah, where the husband, when he was burning on the in the funeral fire, the wives, the widow had to jump into that fire too, because that was a proof of the loyalty of the wife to the husband. To deny that would have been proving her disloyalty to the entire
Wow.
world. So that was like a microscopic sample of what the ancient world was like, right? And when the British came in to India, they stopped all of that because
What year was that they stopped that?
in the 19th century, when the East India Company started coming in, mid 19th century, I think, or maybe even before that.
So they brought tea and they said, stop that burning alive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, of course, a lot of Indian reformers also were influenced by Christian literature, and they also helped. But the British enacted laws that stopped all of these uh, discriminatory practices back then.
John Milton would echo this thought in Paradise Lost, where Eve responds to Adam's choice by saying, tenderly wept, much one that he his love had so ennobled as of choice to incur divine displeasure for her sake or death. The premise that Adam did not overtly sin as Eve was nothing new. Paul wrote in 1 Timothy 2:14, this is Surit talking now, but he's quoting 1 Timothy. He's quoting Paul, quoting Timothy. Excuse me, he's quoting Paul in Timothy that Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. But the idea that Adam sacrificed himself for Eve is interesting, especially in light of the idea of chivalry upheld by modern conservatives and deserves study. So are you critiquing? Are you saying chivalry is wrong here? Or are you saying
Well,
he's what are
well,
you saying
originally
here?
chivalry, like according to a lot of these manosphere influencers, like I quote Dalrock, who is like one of the first manosphere guys who happened to be Christian, right? And he and many others argue that originally chivalry was not intended to be like this kind of chivalry that we see nowadays. So chivalry was then like something practiced by people like the knights, right? Like
Yeah.
it the tales about King Arthur and Lancelot. uh there was a lot of chivalry in those stories, but gradually as it progressed, as it evolved, it became blended with this thing called courtly love.
Yeah.
And courtly
Courtney
love was
Love.
not Courtney
I thought you
Love.
said Courtney Love for a second.
Co- Courtly love, like the so it was
Courtney
this
Love
thing.
inspired Courtney Love from her
Yeah, could be.
lover.
Could be, yeah.
What's that guy's name?
Well,
Smells like
who
Teen Spirit that she was connected to.
Kurt Cobain.
Yeah. Was he chivalrously in love with her? I don't remember the story.
Oh, I think he was too drugged out of his mind to
I thought they
even
had like a
know.
romance. I don't know. That's a thing from the 90s. That was like a big thing back then, right? That they were together.
Well, you speak about the 90s because that's really the last time where where before the radical feminism all started kicking in, right? So much
There
of
was a lot
their
of feminism back then, but
it was not that radical though, was it? Right? You still had people backslapping, backhanding women depicted in media and all of that. Like remember the wrestling stuff and all of that. But anyway, that's beside the point. Like what I wanted to say was that the courtly love was basically this thing that the noble woman, uh, or the aristocratic woman in Renaissance era palaces would uh, would practice, like when they had extramarital affairs and all of that, right, in the court with the other noblemen and aristocrats. So that's where Lancelot thing comes in. So that got blended in with chivalry, right?
It wasn't
And
just
this,
extramarital affairs. I thought the concept was that a knight could have a fair maiden who was in the aristocracy, that he could go out and fight conquests and go on, crusades, and therefore he could pledge his honor that he wouldn't be a marauding rapist, pillager, scoundrel. He would dedicate himself to a nobleman's wife of some reputation in the court, and then that would kind of anchor his behavior to not be a savage Viking. Isn't that really what? It's not just
well, yeah, like that's the Christian
tawdry or something, right?
influence. That's the Christian influence. Like
Yeah.
that's the Jesus effect on history, but it also sort of got parodied. It sort of got turned into a lot, mockery. When with things like the man kneeling in front of a woman to propose, and that those kind of things. There was also like many examples of uh like having the woman walk on the other side
Would
when you're walking
was this
along the
only from
street.
that? Was this only from that era of that Western medieval times, or was it also a parallel thing happening in other cultures, like in India? Were they doing similar type chivalry?
No,
No,
this would I
they
can't
didn't do
think of
chivalry. They didn't
this.
walk on the other side of the road or open the door, that kind of similar types of gestures of honor.
Well, it was not quite chivalry. If there were any courtesy that was or privilege extended to the females of the culture, it was due to goddess worship. That's a whole different thing, right? So chivalry is basically like protecting the vulnerable kind of thing.
Well, that makes
So
me
the
think.
woman is seen.
That makes me think, though, was some of that chivalry and courtly love that was practiced in the West maybe a sublimated form of the itch that they had for polytheistic, uh, you know, female deity worship that those people had just come out of in the Germanic tribes and some of those older religions in Europe. I'm
That's very
just thinking out
interesting.
loud here, wondering if there's a parallel.
No, no, I think you are correct. Right. That was like the entire medieval to Renaissance, those transitions that were happening. You have to keep in mind that it was Europe moving from paganism to Christianity. So a lot of pagan tendencies were also kind of in at play here in the evolution of chivalry and courtly love.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the example that I was going to say, like you had noblemen throwing their coats on the piles of mud or the water whenever their female companions were walking up beside them, so that the mud would not splash onto the woman. So these kind of practices were like the early examples of chivalry getting blended with courtly love, right? So this like I the example that I gave, that the man kneeling and proposing to the woman, that's kind of like a parody from the Christian concern from women, right? Because it's not the woman kneeling in submission, but the man kneeling in submission, but kneeling in submission in such a way to elevate the woman, and protect her dignity from being despite from being ruined because of her vulnerability. So there you can see the double paradoxical things going on there in that practice, right? Because you are elevating the woman, like you mentioned, it was like the goddess worship kind of thing that is that is getting mixed in there with the Christian concern for the vulnerable. So that's fast becoming outdated nowadays as we move
But what
towards
about the Christian language of the being the crown jewel or whatever? There's different language like that, you know, like the crown, the jewel. They use language like that. There's a
Mhm.
vernacular. I can look it up to show you, but if you've
So you're saying crown jewel as in the male and female dynamics?
a bride adorned for her husband, it's
Yeah.
like it's a um uh, I guess like yeah like a what's the word that I'm trying to think of? Not like a
Oh, that's I probably know. I think I know what you're referring to. Well, I don't know. Like, are we reading chivalry into those passages? I'm not so sure. Uh, because back then in the Old Testament, men practiced polygamy, so it might not be the same thing that what we are thinking about.
uh well, I'm talking about like Revelation in the book of Revelation, that adorned passage. You use that here.
Oh, okay, okay. I
Yeah.
think I know. Yeah. Hold on. I'll have to pull up the article and see what you're
Revelation
talking about.
uh Revelation 21:2 describes New Jerusalem as a bride adorned for her
Yeah, I
husband.
was basically talking about. So Revelation talks about Jesus being married to the creation, which is his church, right? So the church is known as the bride of Christ. So the on wedding days, like the bride is adorned for her husband, right? So basically, that's how humanity will be adorned uh, for for Christ when the
Okay, here
New
it is.
Jerusalem comes.
Okay, here's the thing. Proverbs 12:4 says, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones.
Mm.
Yeah. So
So a
notice.
virtuous woman is a crown for her husband. So that's where I'm thinking this idea of the kneeling thing. I'm just trying to think through where they get this idea. You kneel to receive a crown, right? So if you're kneeling, you know, may I have your hand, and that you're the virtuous woman is the crown and that symbol of kneeling. May I have your hand in marriage? That kind of thing. That may have been where that
Well,
concept was thought of.
you have to also keep in mind that in the Old Testament, a lot of these parables were being told to describe Israel's relationship with God. So Israel, when Israel was running to other gods and other idols, Israel was regarded as an adulterous woman, right? And when Israel was faithful to God, Israel was the crown of God's creation. So,
But it wouldn't have been a helpful illustration if it wasn't actually meant on the individual level too, right? I mean, see what I mean? If it's
well,
mainly this is in Proverbs, which is more about practical wisdom for life.
I mean, I'm not arguing that it's not, but we still have to stick to the actual references. Like we still can't have to consider that most of the like even the Song of Songs, where Solomon describes his love for his beloved. Uh, he even there we find God's relationship with the woman, and at the same time we'll still have to consider that this was not quite this was a culture not quite as chivalric as we might think they are, because we're talking about what Bronze Age culture or something like that, wherein even in the book of Leviticus we have many laws that are that might be considered very harsh towards women. Like we all know what the punishment for adultery was, for example. So in the cultural context, I mean, I don't think those Israelites regarded talking eloquently, writing poetry about their romances. That was not, beneath them or anything like that. But I think they're worlds apart from the culture that we are in right now.
Well, yeah, that's because we've had 2,000 or how many years, thousands of years of Christian infection in our culture. So they're going to look different. I guess what I'm saying is, how do we know how do we chew the fish and spit out the bones of these things? Because you've juxtaposed two, uh, in this article, you juxtaposed two people as kind of archetypes of the different positions on chivalry. Rollo Tomasi, you say this person argues that chivalry in its origins was never about treating women well. So he's saying what? He's saying it was all
Yeah, he's saying the same thing that I mentioned about chivalry in its origins was about bravery, loyalty to your nation, and all of that, exemplified by the knights of the medieval stories. And then as the Renaissance era came in, it got mixed in with courtly love, and that kind of redefined chivalry to what it is right now. So when we are talking about chivalry nowadays, we're not talking about knights and battles and all of that. We're talking about treating women well, right?
that's more like
That's
Victorian era
yeah,
gentleman
yeah,
ethics, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, Matt Walsh on the other side of this debate, you say he's more like mainstream conservatism, which says that chivalry is dialectically opposed to feminism. Um, so a man's love is based on idealism, Rollo Tomasi says, and a woman's love is based on opportunism. Uh, Rollo is saying this in response to this modern concept of chivalry mixed with courtly love. And I think I don't know if he nuances that out, but I think
Yeah,
that's
he
kind of
does. Yeah.
that's not very realistic there too, because it's not all men are not, they're very opportunistic too. A lot of men are dating because they want to date and be seen with someone that other men desire. So we know that from mimetic theory that and mimetic observations that men are very opportunistic in their calculations as well. But I get the concept of like some kind of abstraction, right? Like an abstract kind of dreamer type love is tends to be associated with guys singing about crooning and
Yeah.
whatever. That's more of that abstract
Well, I
abstract.
think one of the data that he uses, if you're going to talk about that, is that men date lower and women date higher in the hierarchy,
Yeah.
right?
What in terms of uh what do you mean, like social status or income or
Yeah, social status, income, and all of that.
yeah. But that's because men's value, a man doesn't look at a man with a millionaire girl who's very unattractive and say, "Man, I wish I had that." You know what I mean? If they're very unattractive, I mean, they might in this desperate economy, but typically, you know what I mean? A man is gonna, I want to date the prettiest girl around or whatever, you know what I mean? Or the coolest and prettiest girl I can find, so that all the other guys are in, that they desire her and I want her because they just, there's a relationship in terms of competitive nature that is not as, they don't value income or, leadership skills as one of the top traits of their value judgments there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's also, of course, there's a mimetic aspect to it, right? Because when men are attracted towards women, they often are desiring the same kind of woman that higher status males have with them, right? So there's a mimetic component to this as well. But yeah,
And then I think women also have that idealism with their love too, but it's become more opportunistic because they've been told by our society to try to compete with men on the social status markers that men typically compete on. And when you do that, you end up you kind of get divorced away from the idealism of feminine love, and you move into more of just the pure calculating side of it. So what I'm saying is, within both genders, in my opinion, and I don't know where Rollo or these other guys stand on this, I think within both genders, there's an aspect of their love that is Christ saturated, which is a higher ideal love. And then there's the baseline animalistic, evolutionarily driven love, right? And both of those things are kind of at war with inside each human being to some degree. And the way that manifests is going to look differently. Obviously, divorce right now is primarily dominated by, what seems to be, what is it, 70%? The statistic is happening from the female side.
Yeah,
but,
something like that.
But that's because of the culture that we're in today. It doesn't mean that's always going to be that way necessarily. In other words.
But
Well, I mean,
yeah, when you've taken a Christ-like figure and you've removed him and boxed him. So I think the church over time, over the span of these 2,000 years, has taken Christ moments, and they've said this action that he did here equates to his role as husband over the church, right? The church is the bride of Christ. His husbandry is exemplified here. And most of the time we look at washing the disciples' feet. I think we've taken that example and we have blown it way out of proportion in comparison to everything else he did. That was one small moment. You talked about chivalry. Well, these guys were warriors, man. Like he said, this was like Vikings removed. Jesus had that moment. Jesus had that moment when he comes in riding on a donkey. He's got his posse with him, and people are laying down palm branches at his feet. They're worshiping him. They're literally giving him praise, 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 praise. He has women in that posse. They're not there. They're not there by subjugation. They're not there by slavery. They're not there by force. They're not there by rape. And they weren't acquired. They chose to follow him of their own accord. That's a leader. We've lost touch with the redefining of Adam. Adam was a simp. Adam's failure was not in his just eating of the apple. Adam's failure, Adam's sin comes from his lack of headship with his wife. His wife's going to go off. All of our wives or children, you can't force somebody to make a certain action. They're going to do their things. They're going to find their little avenues to do what they want to do from time to time. Adam's failure was not in just controlling his wife and keeping her fenced in away from that tree. Adam's failure was not saying, hey, babe, we're not eating that apple. I'm glad you told me about that story, but we're not eating the apple. Put it down. That's leadership. That's headship. That's what he failed to do. She started eating it. God doesn't step into the picture and say, whoa, time out. You ate the apple. It's all over. He waits until Adam does nothing and follows Eve. That's the problem with headship. That's the problem with understanding men's and women's roles in our society, is we have lost touch of what Christ came to redefine in Adam and fix. He led the church. He told his mom, no, excuse me, ma'am, this is not my time yet. And yet he still honored her and did what he needed to do. It's leadership. It's understanding the moment. It's understanding mission and purpose and diving into that. and conquering the day. Like I said, he rode in on a donkey and nobody was there in chains following him. But every other king, that's what they brought in on their victory day. This was his victory day. This was his victory march to death. But we've taken the things that he's done, the small things, way out of context. I think I've listened to some Rollo Tomasi, and he talks about being vulnerable as a man is a useful tool in masculinity. But it's a useful tool in that it's used sparingly, very sparingly.
Yeah, you have
Being
to guard.
vulnerable with a woman is like salt. You don't use very much. If you over salt a steak, it's done. Nobody wants to eat it. Nobody wants to touch it. It's inedible. The same with a female. You be too vulnerable, it's over. You've lost. You've lacked headship. You've lacked leadership, and you've simped yourself. Nobody wants to follow a boy. Boys are vulnerable. Boys are scared. Boys don't know what the world's about yet. You can't mate with a boy. So it's used sparingly. Jesus didn't, he didn't 24/7 wipe their feet. We forget about the times when Jesus was in the middle of a crowd, large crowds around him, and he just escapes up to the mountain. No verbiage said to the people, the 12 that he lives with day in, day out. He brushes their teeth, combs their hair, puts their shoes and socks on, guides them, directs them, leads them day in, day out. He gives them no warning, just leaves, takes his time for himself to align himself with Father. We don't talk about that. But that's just as much necessary. That's just as much headship. That's just as much leadership that the church needs. We don't talk about that. We just talk about washing the feet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why chivalry has become this thing that we are seeing nowadays, right? It's become also a product of we not being able to differentiate between men and women and their roles in society. We often, like, there's this thing called complementarianism, or like servant leadership kind of worldview, where where like the pastor of the church has to like kneel to the female pastor or whatever, this kind of
Oh,
weird
God.
thing. Yeah, I mean, it's there. It's the if you if, I mean, even amongst Christians, if you talk to a Christian woman, a self-proclaimed Christian woman, you will have a very difficult time of talking about submission. So that's like, it's not because of the biological aspect of the woman or anything like that. It's simply the cultural time that we are living in right now. We're living in a time of egalitarianism, where it's very difficult to
Hmm.
discern the role of men
But
and women.
it's just one giant test. That's the thing that I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
people understand about
yeah,
it anymore.
yeah,
That's why I
yeah.
don't take this game stuff and the red pill stuff seriously, because it's all just a giant test. As long as you're a nation of people who you can fix a car, but you drink yourself to death at night on a couch, if that's the best that we have as masculinity, there's nothing there to be desirous. There's nothing there
Hmm.
to support. Without a vision animating people, people will be enslaved to their passions, and the passions of a female around a pathetic group of males is not very, it's not going to look good either. If men don't do anything, I can't get anybody, I'm talking about building anti-gravity. I'm talking about, creating energy too cheap to meter, and people think that's cute because they're so emasculated in our society. That is what's considered to be male headship, is to say, to make a stupid movie that nobody's going to watch about what is a woman. You know what I mean? Like that. What does that matter? Oh, that's your big move. That's your big move. I mean, come on, man. Why aren't you going to do anything bigger than that? Why aren't you going to do anything more interesting than that? Why do we play by the stilted rules of of a society that's obviously designed to keep people. So basically, what we live in is one giant open air prison. Okay. And all these little losers that we all have become obsessed with emulating are basically telling us, isn't it not nice that women around this society don't want to follow me as I eat Cheetos and do nothing? If you do nothing about the open air prison that you're in, then you're not worth fighting for. You know, people want to fight for people who are actually going to be the Robin Hoods to get people the hell out of the prison.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm sick and tired of these people, you know, these little trad people. We need a little Caesar. I want a Caesar. What woman wants to marry a guy who's desperate for a big man to lead him? What? I mean, you want big man game, but you still screaming for a Caesar to save you? You're a little peasant boy. What you know what I'm saying? If you're screaming for a Caesar king to save you, Mr. Trump, save me. You would know the truth. You told me so. Now, why don't you listen to me? I'm a man. I deserve respect. Who respects that? Who respects that? Mr. Trump. That's all they got. Mr. Trump gonna save me. That dude's 77 years old. And he stands on stage with the Ninja Turtles and Vanilla Ice for New Year's Eve. Did you know that he literally did that? Is that the future? That's the best we have. A guy who's, I love, Trump is amazing. But why don't you become something like that? That's my point. You know, be something that's not 77 hanging out with Ninja Turtles. 77 years old, and he's tweeting about we need a big FBI building, and Michelangelo is on stage while he's tweeting we need a bigger FBI headquarters when I get in power, while Michelangelo is doing Go Ninja Go with Vanilla Ice. Now listen, he has a right to do that. That's his era, was the 80s. I want him to celebrate what he loves. But if a whole nation of men are watching that and saying that will be the thing that saves us, I'm sorry, man, that should be low on the list in terms of things that will help you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can't get people to understand this, apparently. You know, it's like, oh, you know, gravity is what gravity is, okay? So we're supposed to believe that everything the textbooks have told us about gravity are take it to the bank correct. So we can't get this thing to go up. I just did an episode with Dr. Yu showing things going up. But you're told this is what gravity is. And then you're told by people, you know, I just can't get any respect in this culture. But you're the kind of people that listen to the textbook to say this is all there is, that it can't go back up on its own. You understand? You get what I'm saying? That you can't do any magnetic field or anything to make this thing float back up. You've got a prison mindset. You know?
Well, I think that's one of the things that I write about in the article. And one of the reasons why I compare our culture, our society to that dystopian novel, right, is because we are like the main protagonist of Blade Runner, where the norm and the rule is to eliminate the androids. So when we, in our modern times, when we look at women or men or whatever you want to, you know, your focus is towards, when we look at them, we're thinking of them as objects, you know, machines. We're not thinking of them as human beings. And the ones who drive culture or, you know, rule over us politically, they have an incentive to keep us in this prison that you speak of, is because they want to keep us divided. Like they want to have the men angry towards women and the women angry towards men. And the benefit that they reap from that is total control. And you know, we can't make the anti-gravity that you speak of, David, if we are always fighting with one another.
Exactly.
So that's why, you know,
it's all a psyop. The anger they create for both genders. You're right. It's a psychological operation that has been well developed for decades. And it's always been, you know, it's not like some masters in the shadows did this to us. Humans have always had rivalry about in group, out group. Okay. That's always been the case. In any kind of consideration, tall people ganging up on short people ganging up on tall people. You know, this color doesn't like that color. This shade don't like that shade. This gender has a problem, you know, like what was that guy? What's his name? Dave Chappelle. He said, women be shopping. Remember that? You know, he's mad that women be shopping, you know, and he says that in the line, and that's in the Nutty Professor. Women be shopping, he says, remember? And that's his little comedy routine. It's making fun of a comedian. I like it. But that's what, you know, that's what people do. They're always sniping and complaining about the other group or whatever. But at the end of the day, this stuff has been inflamed to a hellish degree because of psychological operations that our government has highly invested in, you know, and that doesn't, but again, but you can't stay there. It's just good to know that it doesn't have to be this bad, that these are kind of like manufactured events that have intensified something that doesn't need to be this bad. But the idea of fighting the other side, like, you know, just not the way you're going to do it, you know, and that goes for any of this stuff. If you complain about globalism, you know, complaining about globalism really loud and getting 20 million downloads is not how you beat globalism. It's how you entertain people while they're enslaved to globalism. You know what I mean?
Well, David, the reason why things like game and all of that are very popular is because a lot of people don't
Now I
want
look
to
like
be
that guy from
free.
that History Channel that talks about aliens. So I got to watch out here.
Yeah. So,
Okay, go
well,
ahead.
I was going to say that the reason why things like game and all of that, and why Rollo Tomasi, you know, other influencers like him are popular, is because a lot of people, you know, are not willing to walk away from that programming, that mimetic social conditioning that you're talking about. So in that sense, I mean, you can't really blame them, because they're saying this is, you know, if you want to navigate the dating market, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, you can't, you have to know what the nature of the other sex is like. And if you don't know that, if you're going to be naive, and if you're going to think that, oh no, like any woman that I come across is going to be, you know, very Christ-like with me, you know, or whatever, then, you know, you just be a simp like Adam. You have to, you know, that's one of the things that how you become a good leader, is to know the nature of a person, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that just goes right into David's point there. It's like, you know, if you can learn that aspect of what you're saying, that metaphysical worldview of women and men's interactions, if you can learn that and you can somewhat put it into practice, you should be able to do that in every other field of your life. And you should be able to get to the point where you say, yeah, anti-gravity, it's totally possible. It's real. I mean, it's a magnetic field, it's frequencies, and so on and so on. And I mean, again, it's applicable. If it's applicable there, it's applicable everywhere else in your life. Pretty simple.
Yeah, just people don't you have to and it goes for anything. Like if you are doing something in life and people aren't getting it, sometimes it can be that you've gotten around people who are really foolish, and that's part of it. But overall, if people consistently are not able to understand what you're doing or get on board with your vision, you have to figure out how to do it better and figure out how to add different values, you know, add different value to your mix so that people can understand it. I can sit all day long and talk about esoteric theory and say, you know, why isn't it that, I have millions of people watching that. At the end of the day, you just got to you got to figure out what you want to do, have a vision for it, and then go for it. and just enjoy it. You know, I think that the conservative people like the Daily Wire and those guys that make movies, these terrible movies about the basketball team or whatever. I saw the commercial for it. It looks horrible.
Yeah.
And horrible acting, horrible everything, right? So it's the F- people in life. You know, they've got A+ money, lots of money. You know, they've excelled on
Yeah,
that.
but no talent.
It produced F- writing, F- acting, F- color editing, F- everything. And I haven't even seen it. I just saw the trailer. So maybe it's the hit of the year. But just from my observation of the trailer, and I'm thinking to myself, so you give an F- product and you expect that to somehow produce A+ results in the culture? How? How would that produce that? It's not excellent. Okay. When Ben Shapiro tells that we need to lies us into another war, that's F- ethics. Why should people want to emulate what he has to say about gender? What does that have? What does lying people into endless wars have to do with being a man? When I hear these conservatives talk about people's body sizes and stuff, what kind of a man comments about another man's weight? It's gay, right? You know what I mean? It's gay. That's what you got to say.
That is.
That's all you
gay.
got to say. That's what it means to be conservative. You know, I don't drink Bud Light, and I know what a man is, and we need to keep on supporting those sanctions on our own. What man supports starving somebody else's son? Right? When you say sanction our own, because Ben Shapiro told me to. When you say that, that means you're the kind of little scheming little man that won't do it yourself, but you want to hire vast, faceless bureaucracies to starve another man's son and daughter. That's what it means to be a man from conservatives? Come on. It's pathetic, right? And that goes for any of them. Any of those little guys. Any of those little guys. If all you do is you critique the issue about who's in charge, and you say, well, those guys run the world. And you know why I'm the truth teller? Because I'm the one that says it's those guys. Well, guess what? That means you're a loser because you're not doing nothing about it. All you're doing is whining. You get it? So if you think you figured it out, that it's the globalists or it's the Masons, right? Or whatever team, it's the Polish, whatever you think it is, by you saying, well, the Polish, they run everything, and that makes you a man that people should lead. When did William Wallace get his big standing ovation? When he sat there and he said, I figured it out. I figured out how we're in such a terrible situation. You know why we're in this mess? I figured it out, guys. It's the English. The English did it to us. Right? And then, whoa. Can I introduce you to my daughter, sir? You're a man's man now. You figured it out, my friend. It's the English, isn't it? They said, Elijah, always weird. You know, that fake accent that he used, right? It's like that's what the point of that movie was, or whatever the reality of that thing is. That's all. That's it. That's all you got. You can fix a car, but you can't fix the seed oils that are running your engine into the ground, making you mentally weak, estrogenic, serotonin messed up, progesterone destroyed, pregnenolone depleted, testosterone caved. But you can work your body into the grave, work your life into the grave because you didn't stand up and fight for what's right, but you box shadows on the wall like a slave.
That's it's because that's easy. That's the easy choice. That's the easy way. It's easy to not be disciplined. It's easy to not have self-control.
Again, thank God for Adam. These women that are tearing these people apart in terms of not responding, because without them, these young men would have no incentive to ever do anything great in their life. And they're not doing anything great anyways. You see what I mean? Yeah. These people playing Minecraft all day and watching live streams about dating and red pills But what did you do? Do you believe that gravity is what the textbook told you? Because if you did, you're a fool. You know what I'm saying? That's just one metaphor for a billion things we could talk about.
But
you
again,
mad about
even
life?
But even in what you're saying right there, you're live streaming these podcasts. How many of, like, I'd like to know what percentage of those that view actually put the thing into practice, actually go to a bar, actually go and put these things into use in the real world. It's extremely small, I would imagine.
You're talking about the dating thing?
Yeah, red pill. I mean, that's just what David was talking about there. So I use that as the
Yeah.
example. I mean, you could take it into anything. People watch gym videos. How many of the people that watch gym videos, just going and lifting a weight, actually are productive in doing so? I would venture to say it's very small.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that it's the Christian version of bravery is often related to self-sacrifice, right? So whether we are in the dating thing or whether we are in the anti-gravity or whatever we are in, uh, we we have to emulate Christ and emulate his sacrifice on the cross, right? So that doesn't mean literally that we get on the cross, that would be just stupidity. But that means, like, taking on the pain of the world, right? That's what Dostoevsky says, right? I am responsible for the sins of the entire humanity. So
Right.
having that mindset uh, is the key that I touch on in the article, and this is not talked about in the red pill thing, and it's a little unfortunate that it's not being talked about there, because the whole self-sacrifice thing that came out of Christ's earthly ministry is the key to fixing all of this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
But you
to
but you
do
can but you can only sacrifice, like a sacrifice in its original meaning is like a blessing. It's a gift. You have something to give away. That's the sacrifice, right? You have a lamb, you have a goat, you are giving it. So that presupposes that you had something to give away. Jesus only was able to go to the cross because he previously had a determination that was seemingly otherworldly, that was a mission. He had a purpose, a single-minded purpose. And that was to do the Father's will, which had been laid out in the Old Testament, which was verbal at that point. And he lived it to the nth degree. That's all he did. That was his main focus. And from there, now you have something to give away because you have something.
right. Yeah, the kenosis thing, right? The emptying, what Paul wrote about in second in the book of in the epistle to the Philippians, that Christ emptying himself for the sake of humanity, right? And I think that's what you were referring to, is when Christ, you have to have something to give away, and Christ has his divinity,
Yeah.
and he emptied his divinity for all of humanity, basically.
And,
Yeah.
and we, like he said, you'll do greater things than me. That's the call. That's the call, is that we would all take up that cross of husbandry, which means we all as men have a purpose, right? We are supposed to be the priest and kings of our home. How do you do what Jesus did if you are purposeless, if you are missionless, if you have no, like David said, if you have no vision to see beyond this moment? not necessarily in a plan of the future. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, but just a vision beyond where you're at right now. Can you even get to the place where you can question gravity? Can you get to the place where you can question, why is it that every time I talk to a female, I'm scared and I shake and I quiver in my boots and she runs and hates me? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe you should start asking those questions. Maybe you should stop living in your mom's basement. Maybe you should get off of Minecraft. Maybe, you know. But all of those things are difficult. Even back to the example of the gym. The gym, again, it's not just the gym. It's getting there. It's setting an alarm. You don't get to the gym without waking up. You don't get to the gym without getting your clothes on. You don't get to the gym without gas in the tank. You can make all of the excuses in the world, and that's just a simple thing of lifting weights and sweating for a little bit. And yet it has all this stockpile of excuse moments to give to itself.
And what
and
are
to keep
people
you away
afraid
from
of?
it.
What'd you say?
What?
The last thing?
And to keep you away from it.
What are people most afraid of in life?
Themselves.
Death.
Themselves.
Death.
I think it's the ability to live with yourself.
And death. And guess what? God doesn't seem to care about death a lot because he keeps killing every one of us.
Exactly.
He don't give
So
a damn
learn to
about
love
it.
yourself.
Does God care about death as much as we do? He don't like it. We told he don't like it. But there's a lot of death around everywhere. Dead ants, dead trees every winter, right? Dead food, dead. He's killing everything. And that's why I want those apocalypticists to be right. The futurists that believe that we're in the end times and it's happening now, because I don't want to die. Nobody does. That hurts. Usually. Unless you're in that's the nicest way to go, apparently, is in that freaking capsule that goes to Titanic.
But see,
that's like half a millisecond and you're gone.
You're making a good point. But that's why he goes out of his way, God, in scripture to say death has lost its sting in Christ. So go and live. Go have a purpose. Go have a mission. Go have a drive. Go have a vision and do something.
But that's why death is what holds people back. Because people don't want to speak out because they're afraid that they'll lose their job. And if you lose your job, you'll have social death. And if you have social death, you'll have a miserable death because nobody will be there at your funeral when you're dying. So it all goes back to social death and physical death are basically the same on the same continuum. Nobody wants social death. Nobody wants physical death. And we all have some degree of fear of death, and that's okay. You know, if you're climbing a mountain and your foot slips, you should feel the feeling of grabbing a tree branch as fast as you can, if that's all you got. But to live your whole life saturated by that fear of social death and fear of physical death is why nobody talks like what we're talking about, and nobody acts and tries to live it. Okay? And I'm not saying do things haphazardly. You don't always have to do things like a cowboy. It's better to not do things like a cowboy. It's better to do things deliberately. But sometimes you have to do a cowboy thing, and sometimes you have to do a very planned, thought out, well organized plan. There's a time for all these things. But if we don't do this, I'm telling you guys, there's no hope for none of this stuff. I am sick of every year. All we have to live for is what's Epstein gonna do now? You know, the island and all that. I mean, come on, that's all we have to go for this year. It's so boring. Aren't you sick of it, guys? You listen to this podcast right now. You decided to click on an image on your phone and listen to 3 human beings you don't know, maybe, and you're just listening to their vocal resonances through this earpiece right now, or maybe you're watching us and you saw me doing this and you're like, what's wrong with that guy? Whatever it is that you're doing this because you're searching for meaning, right? You're searching for meaning, but you can't spend your whole time trying to figure out what to believe, and you miss out on the why of life. You know, that get up, it's a get up energy. It's an energy. And if you can't, not everybody, that's the problem. Everybody wants, this is the paradox. I was saying this to somebody else on another show. Everybody in our country still wants to be the rock star Elvis Presley, and that's why they never do anything, right? But then there's this other thing where it's like they all think if they're not the leader, they're not doing anything. But they never do anything. You know what I mean? So it's like learning how to just be a part of something.
Yep.
When I learn a new thing, when I learn a new skill set, a true leader comes in and Surit, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you that they have completely bastardized servant leadership to this stupid, idiotic, sentimental thing, you know? And that's why you see all those, you know, Christian movies. They're just like, just rub her back. That's all you got to do. Give her flowers. You know, that stupidity, right? That is, we don't have time for that kind of sentimentalism. There's always a place for something there, but that's all they've got. We're out of ammo if that's all we've got. You know, do the back rub, do the thing like that, but have a vision, you know, and part of having a vision, a true leader comes in like Jesus, and he doesn't take the best seat in the house. Take the seat down the road. That does, if you're only a loser is defined by his position on the seating arrangement. You know what I'm saying? Only a loser. Why am I not in there? Why am I not sitting by him? Well, that's because you're a loser. That's why you're down there. But a true leader is like Christ. He doesn't take the best seat in the house. He takes the seat that's a little bit, the nosebleeds. And then because he's a great person doing what he was designed to do, or she, then you're invited to a better position. And that's part of becoming a true leader. A true leader doesn't knock other people down. He builds other people up. That's what servant leadership looks like. And that's what the game people, I don't know. I know that's a big category. So there's probably all kinds of people, but the general tone is kind of like you knock someone down, and it's, I mean, I understand where there all this anger from both sides of feminists and the game stuff. It's just feeding its own self. And you don't want to take the moderate position because that's just the dumbest position to take within that whole thing. But, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, you're missing the entire point. You have to broaden. What you have to do is broaden the picture, right? If you're looking at this, if you have narrow tunnel vision on just the gender dynamics, and then you zoom out. So let's say, let me use this metaphor. The gender topic that's in this country. You're zoomed in on two people fighting, quarreling, male and female. And you're looking at it, and everybody's trying to analyze who's at fault or who did what wrong or who's to blame and who's the scapegoat. That's what we do. But if you broaden the picture out and all you see is an empty wasteland of nothingness, no wonder that's what they're fighting for. There's nothing to fight for but nothing. But if you broaden that picture out and you see a place of healing and you see beautiful art and you see beautiful homes to be built and you see beautiful places to explore and worlds and planets to go to and music to record and movies to make and, you know, so on and so forth. When you see all the bigger picture, then we can get people oriented to that picture, and then you don't have to worry about the fighting being the end all be all. You know, the reason why people like the Epstein Island boys have so much power is because we haven't figured out how limited our view is. They only exist so long as we continue to believe in the limitations of our powers. We were made in God's image, and that is such a powerful power. We don't really truly believe it. And unfortunately, most of the best forms of Christianity don't talk about it. It's and I hate it because the dumbest forms of Christianity talk about it, but they apply it to stupid things like getting a Rolex. You know what I mean? The smartest, the best types of Christianity don't talk about it in terms of the mainstream. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but the more mature forms of Christianity, never talk about it. They talk about why you can't do jack nothing. But then the dumber versions of Christianity talk about all the time, but they're always applying it to dumb things like getting that jumbo jet, getting that promotion, getting that Twitter follower account up. It's like the dumbest stuff. You're like, oh my gosh. Could you imagine if wise, mature Christianity understood what it means to be made in the image of God and the power that comes with that? And you're afraid of Epstein and his boys? They can't defeat you because death has been defeated. So what are you afraid of,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in a lot of things that you said, but at the same time, I kind of agree with the red pill influencers, people like Just Pearly Things, that lady who runs that channel, is that it's okay. I mean, your conservatives are all about talking the talk. They're like, okay, go out there, slay the dragon, marry the bride and all of that, whatever. But at the same time, you have to be mindful of your surroundings, right? But to lean on an example is that, yeah, death has been defeated, but still, you won't go out and jump off a tower, so say that, oh, it doesn't exist, let me just try and kill myself now. I see nothing happens to me. So I think that's where we have to be realistic, is that we're we're not in that same world of the apostles or of Jesus anymore. We're not in that same world, and we have to keep in mind that there are huge number of people, even among the so-called right wing and conservatives, who are drastically, significantly left wing in every part of their messaging, right? Even in terms of gender roles and all of that. So
Yes.
one of the things like this, if I would challenge any one of you to go out there and talk about submission to the most conservative person you come across. If there isn't any argument within 1 minute, then you can change my name to whatever, because or I can give you $100 or something. So so I mean, like, you still have to be mindful of your surroundings, and if you're not grounded in reality to an extent, then you're just, you're like a very delusional person.
I would just say childlike wonder is the secret to the kingdom of heaven.
Mhm.
These red pill people don't talk about childlike wonder, do they?
Well, I mean, they're not supposed to talk about
Why not?
ideological. They don't give out advices, I guess. They just
What
say
about
this is how
childlike
it is.
wonder?
Well, I mean, you can have wonder, but you still have to ground yourself in reality, right?
Children are grounded. They know where to get their food.
Well, unfortunately, my time is up here, so
I'm
I've got to
childlike
get
wondering
moving.
how you're going to get out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great.